Massacre of 1919, America's forgotten tragedy. In the fall of 1919, the fields of Elaine, Arkansas, bore witness to one of the bloodiest and most overlooked chapters in American history. What began as a quest for justice turned into a massacre that left an untold number of African Americans dead and their stories buried under decades of silence. And what's ironic is that I was born and raised just 8 miles away from where this unthinkable manslaughter occurred, in a little town called Lakeview, Arkansas. I lived there all my childhood and had never ever heard about these horrific murders. This is the story of the Elaine Massacre, a tale of courage, betrayal, and systemic racism that gripped a nation still reeling from World War I. But to understand how this tragedy unfolded, we must first step into the lives of sharecroppers in the Arkansas Delta. By 1919, Elaine was a small, rural town dominated by cotton plantations. African-American sharecroppers made up the majority of the workforce, but their labor was exploited through unfair contracts and predatory practices. These men and women were trapped in a cycle of debt, essentially modern-day slavery. Fed up with these injustices, Black sharecroppers joined forces with the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America. They sought fair wages and the right to control their livelihoods, a bold and dangerous move in the Jim Crow South. On the night of September 30th, 1919, a group of African-American farmers gathered at a church to discuss their strategy. But as they planned, a confrontation was brewing. White men, sheriff's deputies, and armed vigilantes descended on the meeting, allegedly to investigate. Shots were fired. Accounts of who shot first remained disputed, but what followed was unmistakable: chaos. In the confusion, one white deputy was killed and another wounded. News of the incident spread like wildfire, sparking panic and rage among the white population. The local authorities called for reinforcements, and mobs of white men, along with federal troops, were deployed to Elaine. What they unleashed was not an investigation, but a massacre. Over the next several days, an estimated 500 to 1,000 armed white men swept through the area, indiscriminately killing Black men, women, and children. Entire families were slaughtered. Those who survived hid in the dense forests, praying for their lives. The exact number of deaths remains unknown, but historians agree that hundreds of African Americans were killed, their bodies often left to rot or dumped into unmarked graves. As the violence subsided, the massacre's survivors faced another battle: the justice system. More than 100 Black men were arrested, and 12 were swiftly sentenced to death by all-white juries. Their crime? Allegedly inciting the so-called race riot. But the fight for justice was far from over. The NAACP, led by attorney Scipio Africanus Jones, took up their case. Against overwhelming odds, they brought the appeals to the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1923, the court ruled in Moore v. Dempsey that the original trials had been a sham, marking a rare victory for civil rights in the early 20th century. The Elaine Massacre remains one of the darkest chapters in American history, yet it is often overlooked in textbooks and public discourse. Its legacy is a haunting reminder of the lengths to which systemic racism can go to silence those who dare to demand equality. But stories like this must be told. They are not just history, they are a call to action, a plea to remember, and a vow to never let such atrocities be forgotten. In memory of the lives lost in Elaine, Arkansas, 1919. Learn, share, remember.